Hey, it's a great honor today to have a couple of guests here with us. Some of you may be familiar with Straight Ahead. I met Straight Ahead maybe 2 or 3 years before I came to Lynn, and I was out at the Uxbridge Church, and I started to volunteer with a group that worked with Straight Ahead and went into the DYS in Westboro, and got to know some of the folks out there in that area. The very first person I met on that night that I came for an interview here in Lynn was the director of Straight Ahead. I happened to get here about an hour early, drove down to the end of Eastern Ave, and I didn't know anything about where I could stop and take a break until the time to show up for the interview was. So I took a left. I didn't realize I was headed to Swampscott, but I ended up there at the Red Rock Bistro and got a cup of coffee, Robin and I. And lo and behold, there was this lady sitting there with Josie named Claire Sullivan. And she was the first person from Lynn that I met. And just recently, she took a sabbatical and she stepped down from being the director of Straight Ahead. And today we have Jason Ludwig with us, who is the new director. And I just met him last month, I think. And he brought a friend of his, Jerome, that's going to speak. Both of them are going to share with us this morning some personal stuff and also just give us some insight into what Straight Ahead is doing here in Lynn. And I just encourage all of you to listen up and you're going to learn about a great organization and a couple of guys here who have devoted themselves to the Lord in this ministry. So Jason, come forward, please.
It's my first time here at this church, and one thing I can't deny is God's Spirit. I feel like I'm at home here. It's the first time here, so I just want to say that. And so thank you for inviting me here today, and myself and Jerron. Pastor Will had asked me to come and just kind of share about what we're doing in Lynn, so just want to kind of give you an oversight about Straight Ahead Ministries, kind of bring awareness to you. Is anybody familiar with Straight Ahead? Anybody in here ever heard of Straight Ahead Ministries? Great. So for those that don't know Straight Ahead Ministries, it's an organization that's been going we're on our 26th year now. Started by Scott and Hannah Lawson. It started out in Minneapolis which is a single Bible study inside of a detention center. And so Straight Ahead's mission and goal is that every juvenile offender in lockup would be able to to get a chance to hear the gospel and to grow in that if they wanted to. And so today, Straight is really big in New England. We have 19 affiliates across the country and also throughout the world, and so it's actually gone international now. The two main places now is Lynn and Worcester, kind of like the models that we're kind of setting up now to kind of push forth and where we want to go. And so right now in Lynn, like Pastor Will just said, I was just recently given a director's position over there. And so it's really exciting. It's a lot deeper for me. I feel like there's a personal call here. Jerron and I are both from Lynn. We grew up in West Lynn all our lives. And so I'm going to have Jerron come up in a second, and we're going to just share our testimonies with you and kind of this journey that we've been on and how we got connected to Straight Ahead and where we're at and all the work that we're doing. And so right now, we go in a couple different facilities around here in Essex County. The main one is there's been kind of a shift. It usually was with mostly juveniles, but here in Lynn, what happened was when Pastor Claire came here 10 years ago, Straight Ahead's been in Lynn about 10 years now, what happened was a lot of the juveniles were now growing up and they were becoming adults, and at 17 you start getting charged as an adult. We work with nothing but offenders, and so the only requirement you have for Straight Ahead is if you've been arrested before. So we are an intervention ministry. We work with literally the population nobody else wants to work with, which is about 5% of the population of people who they look at and deem as the most dangerous. There's no future for, all the different things that people throw in them, and that's who we work with. And so what happened was a lot of our guys were growing up, and so at 17, what do? Do you let them just go? Well, if you're a ministry, you can't just let them go. And so what they did was they started expanding the age criteria. And so now we work here in Lynn specifically with 17 to 26-year-olds. And so I work up at the Middleton House of Corrections. I go up there and I run re-entry groups all day. It's pretty much, I go up there and it's really just relationship building. I don't go in there with an agenda with the guys. They're in there in programs all day long, so the last thing I want to do is hear about somebody drilling them with more stuff and how to live their life. And so I just go in, I give them a place to debrief, a place to vent, and just to build a relationship with them, and just kind of let the Lord, guide the conversations, a chance to really pray with these guys. And again, I'm going to let Jerron come up in a second, but what's really powerful is that you're going to hear me and Jerron's testimonies today about where God has taken us, and that we were those kids that people looked at and said there is no hope for, And I honestly felt like there was no hope for my life. I honestly thought one day that I'd be spending the rest of my life in state prison because I was just so accustomed to living that lifestyle. And so I'm going to have Jerron come up first and let him share, and then I'll come up afterwards. So again, thank you, Jerron.
So I'm Jerron Reddick. I'm the case manager at Straight Ahead Ministries. I recently just got that position. But prior to me being the case manager, I was lead outreach worker for Straight Ahead. And pretty much my job was to reach out to the young guys or young adults and help them out as much as I can, provide the services to them. So I'm going to share my story. I'm 23, so I'm going to go for the past 10 years of where I've been. And I have a tendency to jump around, but really what I'm trying to get across today is what Straight has done for me and what God has done in my life, and just His grace for me. And so I'm going to share some of my family history and how God has been working in my life even up until now. And so I'm 23, and I first got involved with Straight Ahead when I was in DYS. I was 13 at the time. And how I ended up in DYS is came from a broken family. So both my parents were drug addicts, and so I really didn't have any restrictions. So I was coming home at 1 in the morning, sometimes not coming home, and so I found myself messing around with the wrong people. And so at 13, I became gang involved. I grew up in West Lynn. I've been there my whole life. And so I was running with the wrong guys. And, with the gang stuff comes trouble. And of course, I got into it. And so from 13 to 18, I was in and out of DYS continuously. I would be home for about a month, and then I'd be back in for 6 months. I would get out, be out for 2 months, back in for 3, and it was just nonstop. And but it all started, the seed was planted when I met Pastor Claire. She was coming into the DYS to do Bible studies, and I guess what attracted me to her was she was like a mother figure, and it was just her, the love she had for me, and it was just a woman I didn't know, just that love she just displayed towards me. It was just something I've never really felt. And so she would come every week, and we would meet and we would talk, and of course study the Word. And it's not something that I looked forward to. I just really wanted to see her, but the seed was planted, from the first day I met her. And so I've been off and on with Straight Ahead. I was a participant up until I was 18, and I would go there and then I would disappear for a couple months, just because I was still getting into trouble, And but God has never left my life. He was there the whole time, and I've been very fortunate and very blessed, to have gone what I went through, and came out on the other end. I would say the winning end. And so just to backtrack a little bit, I came to Christ back in 2010, but before that, I was still running around and getting into trouble. I was still gang involved, and I ended up getting arrested. I caught a federal case. You guys may have read it in the paper. It was called The Melting Pot, where they arrested about 48 gang members in Lynn, and I was one of them. I was picked up on drug charges. And The reason I'm sharing that is because that was God in that. You know, at first, a lot of people didn't want to see it, but that day there, He saved me. And I remember being in the police station, and I knew what I did was wrong. I knew I messed up. And, you know, I usually pray when stuff like this happens, say, if you just get me out of this one last time, I will never do it again, I promise, you know. But, you know, that wasn't my prayer that morning in the police station. My prayer was to just let me go home and make things right, because when they had arrested me, my son was right there. So the last thing he seen was, you know, the SWAT team taking me out in handcuffs, and it was 6 in the morning, so we were all, you know, caught off guard. And so my prayer was to let me go home and make things right, and I'll deal with the consequences when the time comes. And my prayers were answered. So I'm in the federal courthouse in South Boston, and so there's about 30 of us down there. And, you know, everybody's going up to the courtroom one by one. And I'm like, you know, when am I going? I want to know what's going on. Am I going to get bailed out? And I want to know what my charges are. And so I was the second to last person to go up out of 30 people. And it just so happens that I got the best attorney. And his office was on the same street as the federal courthouse. I didn't have to pay for it. It was, you know, pro bono. But he was like the best, you know. And I just know that, like, because of him, well, not because of him, it's because of God. You know, he sent him my way. And he had a relationship with the prosecutors, and so I had kind of a, you know, how do I say it? I don't know. But I had like a, you know, kind of them on my side in a way. And so what I ended up going to federal prison back in 2012. Mind you, you know, I'm going to court for 2 years, and throughout the 2 years, I was living with my pastor. I was on the bracelet, and it was just constant prayer every day, every week, every Sunday, throughout the whole week. And it wasn't to, the prayer wasn't to make sure not for me to go to prison. I'm pretty sure some people were praying that. But it was just to soften the judge's heart and show compassion, you know. And when I prayed, it wasn't to say, God, can you let me off? It was to say, just show me mercy, you know. I know I messed up and I'm gonna have to go away, but don't let it be a long time. But if it is, then use me. And so we end up going to court, and I had letters from everybody in the community. People, my professors wrote me letters. Some of them came to court for me. I had about 30 people there. And it was just powerful because, you know, for the judge to see all these people backing me up, knowing that, you know, I made a mistake. And mind you, this was a 2-year investigation they were doing, and I was only involved on 2 sales out of 2 years. And so, you know, really, the person they tried to portray me as a gang leader and a drug dealer, it was false, you know, and the judge seen right through that. And I remember, you know, the DA is just slamming me, you know, making me look like this horrible person, but I'm really not, you know. And I had a chance to speak, and I discredited everything he said. And then the judge looked at me and said, Mr. Reddick, you know, I can tell everything you said to me was sincere. And I could tell you're a good kid, you're a good person, you know. But unfortunately, I have to send you to prison. And I don't want to, but I have to. Because if I let you go, then, you know, what type of tone does that set for everybody to come after me? And so my guidelines, let me bring it back a little bit more. So what I was looking at from the beginning was 10 to 15 years. And so, of course, right back into prayer. You know, and so went back to court. You know, I met with my attorney about 2 months later, and it went down. They said they're going to offer you 5 years. And I said, I don't want to take it, you know. Let's keep pushing. And this is all throughout 2 years. And then, so, you know, constantly in prayer, constantly. I mean, this is how powerful prayer is, you know. And so it went from 5 years down to 3 years. So we went off the guidelines, and the federal system is interesting because it goes by points and stuff like that. So I'm looking at 5 years and then down to 3, and so we finally end up in court the final day, and so I'm gonna leave it in the judge's hands. And so the DA wanted 2.5 years, my lawyer wanted probation. The judge said 1 year and a day. And so I ended up doing 11 months out of that. The reason he gave me the extra day was so I can get good time, because if you do under 1 year, you have to do it that mandatory year. But he gave me that extra day to make sure I got out early. And that's where it all started when I got sent to Pennsylvania. And but the beauty of it was I was able to self-surrender. So I was able to, I flew myself over there. And so I had, time with my family up to the last minute. And, but what happened within that year in that prison was it was amazing. It was probably it was just powerful, just because I had so much alone time, and I was surrounded by some good brothers there, and strong in the faith who was able to build me up. But what happened, I ran out of money one day, and so I couldn't make no phone calls or use a computer for emails. And so I had lost contact with everybody, and like my pastor, my mother, everybody. And so I'm sitting in the room, I'm depressed, and it's just like I needed to speak to somebody. And but prior to that, everything was good. I was using the phone all the time, using the emails, and I was just having I felt blessed. I said, I'm just praising God for everything He's given me. I have my own food and stuff like that. And then when I ran out of money and I ran out and I couldn't use the phone and stuff, I was alone for 2 weeks. It felt like months. And but I heard something that day, when I'm sitting in the cell, and then I heard God speak to me. And this is the only time I've ever felt as though He was speaking to me. And He said He was praising me and following me when everything was going good. Would you do it now? And so for those 2 weeks, I really was able to just sit there and just read the Bible every day and go with the brothers there and just do Bible studies and just pray together. And my relationship with God got stronger just from them 2 weeks. It was just a confirmation, that He never left me and that He was always there, And it just opened my eyes to me saying, really, knowing that He is there, and the love that He has for me is just amazing. And but because of that year, it's really strengthened my faith, and I know I planted some seeds while I was there. And so I was still trying to figure out what my purpose was, because He didn't take me out of that situation to send me back. Of course, punishment was deserved, yes, but God was in it the whole time, and it's nothing. The judge sent me to jail, but it was through the power of God. He was in it the whole time, and so I was still trying to figure out what my plan was. Was it to go in there and be discipled, by some strong brothers in faith? Is it to reach people and bring them to Christ? Is it to be alone and get closer to God? And I still don't know. But I know I have planted seeds. My relationship is a lot stronger because of that time I did, and I came out, blessed. And I can't even say lucky, because I'm not. I've been blessed. And I've been working with my pastor closely, and I've been working at my church doing the homeless outreach. And I came out about 8 months ago, April 26th. And I started working at Straight Ahead that month. I got out Friday, started working there Monday. And that was just, it was just a blessing. And but all this to say, we all have stuff inside us that we have to deal with. We're all maybe broken inside, and we're all hurting, and some of us are doing better than others, But just God, His love for us and what He can do for us, when we seek Him, and He comes when we need Him, not when we want Him to. I mean, He may come when we want Him to as well, but, He knows what we need and when we need it, And sure enough, I needed that year in prison. And I didn't want to go, but I needed it. And I just praise God, for the things He's done in my life and what He's doing now. And I don't know where I'm heading, but I'm going to, should be attending Gordon College September. Through God, I should have a free scholarship, full ride. And so it's just amazing. So what Straight has done, they've been there for me since day one. They never gave up, and that was Pastor Claire, and she's never stopped loving me. I don't think she ever could, and that's just because of God's love. She just displays it so well, and so Jason can better, can tell you more about what Straight Ahead is, and but yeah, that's my testimony. That's where I've been.
So that's a typical story at Straight Ahead. We have so many guys. I mean, when we meet most of our guys, we're meeting them in lockup. We're meeting them, they're really entrenched in the gangs. And I mean, you hear Jerron's story about growing up not really with much of a family. And I can relate to the same thing. I remember being at such a young age, there's no one really to turn to. That's why you see all these gangs, we look at them with so much fear. But really, what it is a bunch of kids that are just broken. The gang fulfills a need of family and love. Right? It's in a little bit of a wrong context, but it does something. And so we meet most of our guys, so many times I think in ministry we're looking for the immediate thing, right? I mean, even you look at this part of the world, everything's so immediate, right? The information is at our hands. We want everything done now, like now. We want to see these guys that have these conversions like Paul did on the road to Damascus, right? We want to see these conversions. But sometimes it happens, but a lot of times it doesn't happen that way. And so, at Straight Ahead, we're in it for the long haul with these guys. Most of these guys aren't even ready to hear the gospel. So it starts with relationship first, We're just going and building this relationship with these guys. And then start doing more practical needs that Jesus would do. I mean, you look at the whole ministry of Jesus, right? He prayed so much with people, And so it's through the prayer that we sit down with these guys, we start praying with these guys in the jail, that God really starts to show up, It's not my weight to carry, And that's the beautiful thing about serving God. It's all about Him. It's all about Jesus. It's all about what He's going to do. And so anytime I feel myself getting overwhelmed, I look and I say, man, what responsibility am I carrying of them? I think there's so many pastors that get burnt out in the ministry and so many things, and I look and I wonder how much of it are they doing in the ministry to maybe fulfill their own needs, or how much responsibility are they carrying for themselves? And so I'm just so grateful that God does all the work, that I can just sit surrendered unto Him so that He can do the work through me, and be in that position and just be so privileged and honored to work with Him. Like Jerron's story, I grew up in West Lynn myself. I was never gang involved, but I grew up in a very dysfunctional family. My father was a chronic, heavy alcoholic, and he loved cocaine. And so growing up for me, it was my aunt and uncle would come over, and they'd bring my cousins over, and that was our way of just being able to play with them. But really, they were over all the time just so that they can get high, and they would just drink and do cocaine. And I remember the first experience with that. I remember my brother was a little bit more gutsier than I was. He was younger than me. I remember he's like, come here. And I remember, because my father would say they're going downstairs to look at the motorcycle. And so, because he had the motorcycle in the basement, and I remember looking over the top of the stairs and seeing a big pile of cocaine. And knowing it was from just, I knew what it was because of the DARE programs in school back then, And so I was just like, that was like my first experience with drugs, with cocaine, just seeing it. But it wasn't off, it was often that I'd be waking up in the middle of the night My mother was a waitress. She worked, I don't know if you guys remember El Torito on Route 1 years ago in Saugus, the Mexican restaurant up there. But she was a waitress there, and so she'd often come home at, late, 2:30 in the morning when the place was closed up. But, my mother liked to drink her beers, but she hated drugs. She was totally against it. So she would come home and obviously see my father high and confront him, and that was it. He would just beat her to a sense. And this would happen all the time. And so it was, often, many times, I remember, the police would come, the stuff would spill out into the streets. I remember being many times sleeping on my grandmother's couch, because we'd end up going to my grandmother's for the night to sleep there. And I remember even to this day, I still got some bitterness in there. It's just God's been working it out of me towards my uncles, because I remember there'd be times when I'd be laying there, and my mother would be in the kitchen talking to my grandmother, my uncles, and they would put it on her like it was her fault that he was beating her. When really, it was like this big conspiracy theory, because they're the ones getting high with her, and so they were afraid to confront my father because one, he'd probably beat them up, or, that's like they're getting high partner. And so my family just shunned my mother for this, and really just never helped her out, and it was tough. I remember just sitting on the couch sometimes crying, just listening to them, really just talk down on my mother, and just the anger that just rose up inside me, And so, I remember growing up, I had, at the time, I had a brother and two sisters. We lived on Grove Street over there. And my mother was trying to support a mortgage and raise 4 kids. And so, she had to work 3 jobs. My family wasn't helping out at all. But eventually the bills piled up and she couldn't keep up with it. And so I remember the electricity, the heat, the water, everything got shut off. And I remember literally growing up, and we used to have to buy water from the store with food stamps so that we can literally flush the toilet, and so that we can take baths in. And so I remember growing up in school, in elementary school, always going to school with dirty clothes on. I remember, every time we did the arts and crafts in school or something, I had, back then the corduroys are in style, right? So I remember wiping the glue off on my pants, and always being embarrassed because that same piece of glue would be there for 2 weeks. And I was always picked on, called scrub, and, and the violence would, spread out into the neighborhood. So people knew what my father was doing. And so it was always getting picked on and teased. And so anyways, I just started acting out the way I see my father is. So I got in a lot of fights in elementary school, would always be getting suspended. But really, man, inside I was just a scared little boy. I just had so much shame inside, and just felt like, man, it just wasn't good. And so anyways, I remember it was when I finally went into junior high school. I went to Breed over in West Lynn. And it's funny, I look back now at the kids I hung around with in junior high school, and now it goes from one neighborhood to multiple neighborhoods in one school, so the spotlight's not so much on me anymore. And I end up meeting more friends. And I look back now, and all those friends I had then were going through the same problem I did. And it's just weird how you just kind of click up with people. And so that was back in the early 90s, and so a lot of my friends had older brothers, and so back then there were a lot of car thieves, and they would steal cars, and they would go to the malls and make a lot of money. And so I seen them with nice clothes on, and they always had nice cars, even though they weren't theirs, but they always had money in their pocket. And so I started picking up the things they do. And I remember growing up, going over to Cap's Junkyard over in West Lynn, practicing to break into cars and the door locks and cracking steering columns. Because now I have an opportunity where I can take things in my own hand. I don't have to wear dirty clothes anymore. So I started stealing cars. I started going to the mall, stealing clothes and making money doing that. And so it was like this identity that I was starting to take on. I remember at a young age, I used to look up to these kids, these older guys, and the thing you would hear about their names was all the crazy things that they did. And so at a very young age, I started to create a name for myself, right? Because at 12, 13, who am I? Jason Ludwig, right? So I started to create this image and this name. I wanted to be known like these guys, and so it was like this facade. It's the enemy. He uses it with us to put up this false image to hold people out, to get to know who you really are, So I started doing these things at a very young age that were out of the ordinary. I remember going out, starting to steal cars and going to the malls, and how awkward it felt, and it was really strange. But eventually it became a habit, became normal, and it became very easy. And so it was like this image I started to build up and started to live up into. And so I'm not getting into too much of the details. I really want to get into the part what Jesus really came into my life. But from the age of 12 to 25, I remember my addictions and my being locked up. So my addictions went from just drinking alcohol, smoking marijuana, all the way till I was 25 to eventually mainlining cocaine and shooting cocaine on a daily basis and running around robbing drug dealers throughout the city doing home invasions for a living. And so it was just insane, the progression. I remember also being locked up in Department of Youth Services at 13 and then out until I was 17 for like 3 years. And then at 17 to 25 started getting adult cases, and I served a little bit over 6.5 years up in Middleton. And so when I tell you that I really had no hope for my life, and when I started shooting cocaine, I really said, this is it. Like, you know, like I couldn't live out here anymore. I was living under so much stress. I just, like, getting locked up for me, and like, I could never kill myself. I didn't have really the guts to do it, but it was just like, I was just so hopeless. And so for me, getting locked up was like this just breather for me, you know? It was like this place of comfort, like, just get me off these streets. And so, but one story I want to tell you before I get going, but I remember being 14 years old in this DYS down the Cape, down in South Carver. I was doing a 3 to 5 month program. And I remember these two guys would come in playing the guitar, these two Christian guys, and, you know, talking about Jesus and all this other stuff. And I remember there was they brought this kid in my age, and he gave his testimony about how Jesus has changed his life and all this other stuff. And I'm like, wow. But the thing that really drew me to them was like they had this peace about them. And I was just like, wow, just so fascinated by how much peace they had in their eyes, you know? And like, that's all I wanted. I remember saying, man, I want this guy to adopt me. Like, I don't want to go back to my house, you know? Like, and it was to the point, like, even in the Department of Youth Services, I was living better there. Like, I was getting meals there. I was eating every day. Like, those, depending on where you were, they take you on field trips. But all in all, I mean, they had pool table there, foosball. It really wasn't bad. It was way better than when I was living at home. And so it was like, why not be here? But I remember thinking, I wish this guy would adopt me. Like, I don't want to go home. You know, and I remember going to church with them, and I remember having an experience with God back when I was 13 years old. And so, naturally, I got out, and, you know, you heard most of the story, but I obviously didn't stick with it. And I remember they used to send me letters and stuff at Christmas and all that stuff, and so, whatever. So anyways, I remember it was on my last bid. I just got caught doing some stupid stuff in Salem, trying to break into a safe in a restaurant. And I remember being in the back of the cruiser, almost like what Jerron was saying. And I felt like this relief come off of me. I was on parole at the time. I'd already done multiple sentences. And so I said, man, I'm going to do a really nice bid on this one. But I remember sitting in the back seat of that cruiser. And I said, man, I just felt this weight come off me. And I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. I said, but I'm never returning to this lifestyle again. What did that mean? I had no idea, because I've tried everything there was. I've tried the state prison boot camps, tried, you know, AA and NA and all these different things. And the only thing, them things, I mean, there's good, you know, there's good in each one of them things, and there's parts of them that did benefit me. But what happened was every time I failed, I just felt like I just couldn't do it. And so I just always felt more condemnation and like, you know, like just like this is hopeless, this ain't for me. I figured doctors are doctors, teachers are teachers. I said, but I'm going to be doing life and the rest of be locked up for the rest of my life in prison. And I just thought that was the cards that was dealt. I said, man, I've just been given a crappy hand from day one. And so subconsciously, I believed that. Well, I remember being up there, and I was just waiting to go back to get sentenced, and it was Ash Wednesday. At the time, they were doing Catholic services. I remember Father David came on the block. There was a Catholic priest up in Middleton. Joey, you probably remember Father David. And so he invited everybody to come over. And so being up on the pretrial blocks in Middleton, there's not much movement. You're pretty much just sitting up there. You might get gym every once in a while, but you're on that block all the time. There's no programming for you because you're not sentenced yet. So you're just pretty much sitting stagnant up there. So I was just going over to the service just to get off the block for something to do that night. Well, when I went over there, man, I've never met been in a Catholic mass like this before. They had these people from Peabody, these charismatic, these people like speaking in tongues and like all this stuff. And I'm like, totally different from any Catholic service I've ever been in. But there was these little old ladies. They remind me of like my grandmother, but they were just so welcoming. And like there was no agenda behind them. Like I could see, like, you could pick up on people with different agendas. And it was just like this just pure love like they had, And I was just like, man, there was that peace again that like they had. I remember when I was 13. And I remember even through all the years being out there ripping and running, doing my thing, it was like, I look now and I know it was God speaking to me, because He used to give me images of like one day you're going to live like those Christian people do. And I used to get these images of me with a tie on and a suit, coming out of Catholic church on a Sunday. So I get these images, but all along I just felt like that was God speaking to me, right? Giving me a little bit of hope. Didn't know it then, but I look back now and I know it. And so, anyway, so I started going over to these services, and I remember while I was going over there, I just kept going over. It was just like this peace, man. God was just drawing me there, It was like this peace, and I just kept going, just going. And then I remember I went back to court. I got sentenced. I just said, just give me the sentence. I don't want to fight this thing. I'm guilty. So they gave me 2.5 years. And so I was up there, and when I got sentenced, I went to another block. And I remember years in the past that I went to this other service. There was this guy up there, Ray Perez. And so Ray's hardcore Pentecostal. And so I remember being in a service before to meet a friend from the block. And they're clapping, they're dancing. And I'm like, this is church? I said, this is all right. You know what I mean? And so I said, is that guy still here? And they're like, yeah, he's still here. He's on Sunday mornings. I'm like, all right, I'm going to go check out his service. And so anyway, I remember being in a service. And the thing that hit me was, he says, you can't serve two masters. You can't serve two masters. You either serve God or you serve the devil. And I says, whoa. I had one of those moments where my life like just went before my eyes. Like all the roads I've been down, and they all landed here in jail. And I'm like, well, that's easy enough. I sure the heck wasn't serving God, because I probably wouldn't be here. And I said, if you're real God, I says, you need to make yourself known to me. I'm not going to believe this guy, this Bible thing. I said, I need to know you're real for me. And if you are, I give you my life. And right there in the spot, the Holy Spirit came into me, and like scales fell off my eyes. Like I'd never been the same since. It was like, I remember going back to the block. You remember that facade I told you, the image that we carry, we hide behind? I seen it on every single man inside the block. And it was just like, man, I wish I could just push the button. And I'm like, you guys don't even know what you're representing, This lingo that goes around in jail, like, keep it real. And it's like, you don't even know what you're talking about, because you ain't really yourself. You're hiding behind this image, man. It's just like, it was crazy. And I remember the addiction of like, the cocaine addiction, everything was just gone. I remember God started giving me new images of like, just being out in the streets, just sleeping around with all types of women. I remember He gave me an image. He goes, Jason, what would it like to hold off until I give you a wife? What would it be like to hold off? And I got this, like, wow, how pure that would be. Of just like holding off until I get a wife before I had sex again with anybody. And it was just like, so God's giving me these new images. So to speed it up, and so I took that time. It was like seminary time. I got a job in the chapel. I started working with Doug and with Ray Perez. I got out in 2004. And I go to the church in Saugus called The Vineyard. And I remember Ray Perez said to me, he goes, when you get out, man, I was just so sold out for God. Like, there was no turning back. I was just so committed, And I remember Ray says, when you get out, he goes, don't look for your wife. He goes, you're going to look over one day in service, and she's going to be right there. So I'm like, okay. And so anyways, I get out, I'm on the bracelet. This is 2000, was it 12-step in Saugus. I was running New Brothers Fellowship groups up there with Doug. And I was working. My mother got me a job at the Porthole restaurant, and I was on the bracelet making like $7 an hour. And so I was down there. And I remember it came to a point where I was about to get off the bracelet in like 2 weeks. And so this just crazy anxiety just came over me, this nervousness of like, man, is it going to be the same again? Like, am I going to mess this up and wind up back in jail again? Like, and I was just so stressed out, and I'm like, I'm making only $7 an hour. Like, what job am I going to get? And I remember sitting on this, and at the time I had poison ivy, right? I got poison ivy. And so it was in the summertime, so the kitchen was like 140 degrees. And the boss actually made me come in and start working with this. So, I was just having a bad day. I was like, this guy's crazy. This can't be health-wise. So anyways, so I'm sitting on this milk crate. Yeah, don't eat at the porthole. No, I'm just kidding. So I'm sitting on this milk crate, and I felt the presence of God come over me. And he said, Jason, don't worry about nothing. He goes, one day you're going to be working for me. You won't be working for man long. You're going to be working for me full time. And I'm like, when is that? So that was in 2004. And I remember one day I was in service to church, and I look over, and I said, whoa, who's that? And I remember saying in my head, I'm like, she's either 18 or she's married, so either one won't work for me. And so I remember saying to my buddy, Josh, I said, hey, who's that? And so, long story short, I ended up meeting my wife in church, and we got married 10 months later. And this year we'll be celebrating 9 years. And so we have 3 beautiful children. A 7-year-old Jason, Josiah's 5, Gianna is, that's our daughter, she's 15 months, and we got another one right now on the way. And so God is good, and He's about transforming lives and setting a new legacy, breaking off generational curses, right? And so we're living in Peabody now, but I remember hearing that voice from God on that milk crate that day. And so from 2004, I started cutting hair in Middleton when I was up there as a barber. I finished my barber's license when I get out, so I've been cutting hair for the last, 6-7 years or something like that. And so my goal was the type of barber I wanted to be was that I'd do all aspects of barbering, whether it didn't matter what your race was. I can cut all types of hair. I can do colors, the shaves, everything. And when I got to that point, then I'll be launching my own barbershop. And I'd raise up all my barbers, and we'd have the best barbershop around. So that was my goal. And so I remember I got to that point, and I was sitting there one day, and I just felt like it was time to move on from the barbershop that I was at. And unfortunately, I didn't have the money to start my own shop, and I just felt like there was something going on that God was working out, and I was just like, I remember saying this prayer, I don't know what's going on. I'm getting frustrated. I just feel like it's time to move on. I got no money to move on my own shop. What are you going to do? And so I remember I was going to Haiti on a missions trip. And so I was a coordinator for my church, and the church in Salem, New Hampshire was the main church for this. So I was just emailing back and forth with them just about logistics, getting stuff ready for Haiti. And I remember seeing on their website, Straight Ahead Ministries. And I always remembered Straight Ahead just from being in seminars, and I loved the mission of it. I always felt like I was supposed to be working with juveniles, but not in a youth group. I remember even my pastor offered me a youth pastor job a couple of years ago, and I knew it wasn't God, and I turned it down. I said, this is not where God wants me. And so anyway, I click on it, and I shoot an email over to Straight Ahead. We had just moved to Saugus, our church, and this is in Lynn. And I'm like, this is part of our vision as a church, is to, impact the other cities around us. And so I shot him an email just so I can just see how I can just be involved. I just want to volunteer. I just want to just be part of it. So a month went by, and nothing happened. I'm like, oh, that must be... Then I get a phone call from this woman, Pastor Claire. And I'm talking to her on my lunch break, and she's drilling me with all types of questions. And so I get on, and she's like, when can you get down here? When can you meet me? And I'm like, man, I can't come today. I'll come Monday. It's my day off. Okay, yeah. So I get off the phone to say, did she just offer me a job without offering me a job? I mean, she was very persistent, man. She was like, get down here. I want to meet you and this and that. So anyways, I go down to Straight Ed, and I met with Pastor Claire. And I remember talking with her, and I just, she offered me the job, and I remember sitting there in her office, and, one thing I said, well, I got a family, and I said, I hate talking money. I said, but what's the pay? I got bills to pay, right? And so she said it was $27,500, and I'm like, what? You gotta be kidding me. So I'm like, there's no way I can do that, you know what I mean? But I'm ready to jump on board, you know what I mean? But I'm like, I gotta talk to my wife. See, the good thing about how God put me and my wife together, I'm ready to, I'll just do it. My wife's about numbers, and she's very logistic, and so she balances me out pretty well. So she keeps an even keel on me. So anyways, the position was actually $6,000 less than what I was making at the barbershop, and I'm just cutting corners here, just trying to get through. So I brought it home to her, and she's like, are you crazy? She goes, no, there's no way that could happen. I said, all right, well, I figured you were going to say that. I said, but let's just bring this to prayer. Let's just see what happens. And so, long story short, I met with my pastor. I told him what was going on, and we prayed about it. And he's like, this is definitely where you're supposed to be. I met with a few other people in my church, other leaders, and just praying and praying and praying. And I got the yes everywhere I was going. And I kept feeling this peace and peace. And it was finally when my wife says, we're supposed to do it. She goes, I don't know how it's going to happen, but we're supposed to do it. And so anyways, to speed it up, my pastor gave me some suggestions, and I started raising money, and sure enough, send out letters, and the money just came through. Like God supplied it all. My pastor ordained me. I got ordained as a pastor, and so that was 3 years ago. And so I started out with Straight Ahead as just a basic reentry worker, just like what Jerron is, just an outreach worker. And I just got in there, and I remember we was meeting in that first building, Will, and it was a place maybe 1,000 square feet. But I remember just being in there and just like, wow, like, really wasn't much there, and so I just started, there was so many different things that needed to happen there, so I just started just showing up and just doing things, just making plugs and holes, and I just started growing through, God just really raised me up in there. And so when we got this new building over there that we're at now, we're on Monroe Street. God bless us with a building that we're debt-free in over there. And so, yeah, it's amazing. I love it. You guys come down and check it out sometime. We got the silk screen up there. We got the barber shop up there. I teach guys how to cut hair, and then if they like it, I send them off to school. So God's really blessed us with that building right now. And so anyway, it was about a year and a half ago, and I remember we were going through just such a message Straight Ahead. We had so many staff that were working with us that were just like, they were selling drugs with Straight Ahead shirts on, they were sleeping with each other, the people were not doing work, and it was so like, we were like spending more time on staff. And I'm like, this is just crazy. So we had to let like four, and Pastor Claire had made me the assistant director then, so we let go like 4 or 5 staff. I remember Pastor Claire was really going through it. She was having a really tough time. She was just really feeling beat up. This is before she went on a sabbatical. And I remember I was sitting in there, and it's funny how God speaks to me a lot of times in the shower, but I'm going to wrap it up here. But I'm in the shower, and I heard God literally speak to me, and he showed me Pastor Claire on an island by herself. And he says, you need to jump on an island with her and put her on your shoulders and carry her, and that you're going to be the next face of this organization. And I was like, whoa. So I remember I was so excited to go to work that day because I wanted to tell Pastor Claire, what I just heard from God. But it was a Tuesday. And so she's off on Tuesdays, and she don't play games with boundaries, so you can't call her on a Tuesday. And so I'm just over there like pacing back and forth like, oh my God, I just heard this from God. I got to tell her this. And so anyways, she calls me. I'm like, oh, it's Pastor Claire. So I go in the other room, hey, what's up? And she's weeping on the phone. She's not doing it. I said, listen, I got to tell you something. I know you're going through a And so she was frustrated, like, what are you going to tell me? What? She was mad that I kind of cut her off. I'm like, listen to this. I was just in the shower, and I told her what happened. And she starts crying even more. Oh, my God, you have no idea. She goes, Jason, I was just down the beach walking and praying to God how I felt just so alone and just broken and just all alone in this thing, and I just can't carry this anymore. She goes, I'm ready to check out and all this. And I'm like, what? So this brought her hope, and we looked at the time, and it was like within like 10 minutes from happening. It's like she was down there praying, and then this happened. So it was insane. And so here I am now. Pastor Claire goes on sabbatical, and that was kind of like their probationary time to see if I was going to be the person for Straight Ahead. And I took on, they finally promoted me to being the director at Straight Ahead. But I want to wrap this story up with this, because this is powerful. Do you remember I told you those 2 guys that came into that DYS way back then? Well, I remember I was trying to find these guys and just say thank you, because this is some of your long-lasting fruit, right? Sometimes we get into ministry and, we want to see that seed just grow quick. But a lot of times we got to just be seed planters, right, and be okay with that. And another one waters and the other one helps grow and all that, but we'll reap our reward. But I just wanted to say thank you to these guys because for what they did, because that was the time that really kept that impression on me. And so I remember me and Danae trying to search down these guys and trying to find them for years, and I never could find them. And so I remember the first week I got hired on with Straight Ahead, I was giving my testimony in this like class, and those people from Straight Ahead from all over the country. And I remember we were down at the beach for lunch, and Hannah wasn't in class, which is Scott's wife. And she said, Jason, can you tell your story to me again too? I'd like to hear it. So I was telling her my story, and I started telling her about these guys who came into that. And she goes, Jason, she goes, did you know that was us? Like, those guys worked for us. That was Straight Ahead, way back when I was 13. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. So I got a chance to reconnect with John Kinsley, who was the international director of Straight Ahead Ministries. He goes all over the place. But after 20-something years, being able to reconnect with these guys, I mean, if you put that in a book, people wouldn't even believe it. Like, you know, like that is like a real God story. Like, the place that planted the seed in me is now the same place I am as a pastor and as a director, in the same city that destroyed me. Like, and I'm now going back up to Middleton, House of Corrections up there, place where I did all my time. And like, God has showed me so much favor up there, and all the staff that were like younger, when I was doing my time up there, they were just officers then, and now up in high-ranking positions, and so they got a chance to see how my life's been transformed, and so I have so much favor up there. It's just been absolutely amazing. And so when I told you that, like, this is a personal thing for me, like, this is a call, and the song God in the City, like, I love that song because God is in this city. Like, crime rate in Lynn has dropped dramatically. Like, the gangs have dropped dramatically in Lynn. Things are really changing here, like in this city. Like, God is about his business here, and I really truly believe we're going to see a huge revival come through here, and it's going to start in the prisons, and it's going to pour out into these streets all throughout Essex County. And so just be praying. I just love when you guys are praying earlier. I just felt so much hope in here, you know? Like, even all the tough times going, and like, God is hope. If we can't hold on to Jesus, what do we have? Like, he'll pull through. He'll pull through. If we continue to pray and just stay surrendered, he's going to handle things. Like, and so I'm just, you know, thank you for inviting me into this church, and I'm just really excited about the future and what we can do together in the city through prayer and whatever it is. And so I personally invite any one of you guys, anytime you want to come down to Straight Ahead and check it out, and give you a personal tour and show you more what we do and introduce you to some of our participants and stuff like that. But God bless you guys. This is an amazing church. I feel God's Spirit here. And so, Pastor Will, thank you for letting me come in and share. Thank you. Amen.